A billionaire husband brought his mistress home for the night, while his 7-month pregnant wife slept upstairs. Lucian Ward opened the door, and Seraphine Vale stepped inside like temptation wrapped in perfume. "Are you sure about this?" she asked, voice low, dangerous. "She's asleep," Lucian murmured, though his pulse betrayed him. "Just one night." Seraphine's smile curved, soft but certain. One night can ruin a lifetime. Her fingertips lingered on his collar, a touch that felt like both power and punishment. He didn't stop her. Upstairs, Nerissa Hale dreamed of a happy home, of her husband's laughter beside her, of the daughter they'd soon meet. Her world was whole, even as it was breaking below her feet. Lucian poured 2 glasses of wine, one for comfort, one for guilt. The house, golden and silent, became witness to a love already dying. He thought money could hide sin, but even gold can't silence a woman's heartbreak. If you've ever loved someone who lied to your face, stay. This story will remind you that no betrayal stays buried forever, and no woman stays broken for long. Lucian Ward hadn't always been the man who betrayed a sleeping wife. Once he was a boy with nothing but hunger and a promise to himself, never be poor again. He grew up in a cramped apartment above a pawnshop, the sound of broken dreams echoing through thin walls. Ambition became his only inheritance. Years later, he built Ward Capital from a rented office with 1 desk and no guarantees. Every deal was a battle, every dollar a small revenge against the past. Success came, fast and blinding. The city began to whisper his name with respect and fear. People called him self-made, but Lucian knew the truth. He was survival-made. Behind the polished charm was a man still running from the boy who had nothing. He believed wealth meant control, but control turned to obsession, and obsession to pride. The more he gained, the less human he felt. And now, in a mansion of marble and silence, that boy's promise had twisted into something darker. He'd escaped poverty, only to become a prisoner of his own success. While Lucian measured life in numbers, Nerissa measured it in moments. She had once chased stories, not status. As a young journalist, she believed truth could change the world. Her words carried warmth. Her laughter softened even hard-faced editors. When she met Lucian during an interview about philanthropy, she saw not a tycoon, but a man who had fought his way out of poverty. His drive fascinated her. Her sincerity steadied him. To Lucian, she was light. Everything his world of power and pressure was missing. To Nerissa, he was proof that love could grow even in ambition's shadow. She left reporting after marriage, promising herself it was only temporary. The pregnancy made that pause permanent. Now, every flutter inside her felt like hope wearing her heartbeat. She decorated the nursery herself. Soft blues, sunlight, and little books waiting on a shelf. Nerissa trusted love more than money. She believed kindness could anchor any storm. When Lucian worked late, she wrote him notes on yellow paper. "Dinner's warm. So is my heart." He rarely answered, but she kept leaving them. In her calm world, doubt was the one thing she never invited. She had no reason to, not yet. To the city, Lucian and Nerissa were the golden pair. Magazines praised their elegance, investors toasted their vision. They hosted charity galas where laughter shimmered like champagne, and flashbulbs captured smiles that looked effortless. Together, they symbolized success, beauty and empire under one roof. But perfection is a costume. Behind the photographs, their conversations grew shorter, their dinners quieter. Lucian's phone never stopped vibrating. Nerissa assumed business never sleeps. After all, wealth demands worship. On their anniversary, a ballroom glittered with applause. Nerissa's hand rested on her belly while Lucian accepted another award. He thanked his inspiring wife, yet his eyes drifted beyond the crowd. There, beneath the golden lights, stood a woman in crimson silk, Seraphine Vale. Their glance lasted a heartbeat too long. That night, Nerissa told herself she was tired. Lucian told himself it was nothing. But the silence between them had already started to speak. Seraphine Vale was the kind of woman people noticed twice, the first for her beauty, the second for her intent. A rising designer with charm like perfume, she knew how to linger in memory. At the fundraiser, she approached Lucian with effortless confidence. "Your foundation saved my cousin's business," she said, eyes steady, smile rehearsed. Flattery disguised as gratitude. Jazz drifted through the room, slow and smoky. Lucian felt the air change. Seraphine spoke of art, ambition, and how people mistake luxury for happiness. Her words mirrored his secret thoughts, and that reflection drew him in. She laughed at his guarded jokes, touched his sleeve as if permission were already given. By midnight, they stood alone near the balcony. City lights shimmered like temptation itself. She said softly, "You look lonely for someone who has everything." He didn't answer. Some truths don't need reply. When they parted, Lucian carried her scent home like evidence. One look had become a memory soon to become a decision. The empire he built for control had just met its first crack. Lucian told himself it was business. Seraphine wanted a collaboration between Ward Capital and her design house, a charity line for luxury investors. He agreed, pretending it was strategy, not desire. Their first messages discussed budgets and sponsors. The next, dinners and memories. Soon, work became the excuse, not the purpose. Her texts came late at night. Short, suggestive, careful. "You think too much, Lucian. You deserve to breathe." He answered when he shouldn't have. Each reply blurred another boundary. He told himself he could handle it. He had handled everything else, but temptation isn't loud. It whispers until silence feels empty without it. When Seraphine laughed through the phone, Lucian felt younger, freer, the version of himself before the weight of fortune. He started to believe she saw him, not his empire. That illusion was enough to keep him coming back. In every secret message there was a quiet confession. Power wasn't what he craved. It was escape. Nerissa noticed the distance before she understood it. Lucian's hugs became brief, his eyes elsewhere even when he smiled. He left earlier, returned later, always with a new meeting or client to explain the hours. His phone stayed in his hand, screen turned away. At dinner, she spoke of baby names. He nodded without hearing. Sometimes he stared into nothing, lost behind walls she couldn't climb. The house grew too quiet. Even laughter echoed differently. One night, she woke to find his side of the bed cold. In the dim light, his suit jacket was gone. "Just stress," she whispered to herself, the phrase she repeated like prayer. He had worked so hard, carried so much. He deserved patience, not suspicion. Still, something deep within her shifted. A mother's intuition, a wife's dread. She brushed it away, laying her hand on her stomach. "It's okay," she whispered to the child inside. "We're safe." But the words trembled as they left her lips. Rain hammered against the mansion's windows when Lucian's phone rang. Seraphine's voice cracked through the storm. "They evicted me, Lucian. I have nowhere to go." He hesitated. He could have called a hotel, sent money, fixed it from a distance. But guilt disguised itself as compassion. "I'll come get you," he said, before reason could answer. The streets glistened under lightning as he drove, each flash revealing his reflection on the windshield, half pity, half desire. Seraphine waited by the curb, suitcase in hand, mascara streaked but composed. When she slid into the passenger seat, her perfume filled the car like a verdict. Back at the mansion, Lucian unlocked the side door. Upstairs, Nerissa slept, unaware of the storm entering her home. Seraphine's heels clicked against marble, then fell silent as she slipped into the guest room. Lucian stood in the hallway, heart pounding, telling himself this was only for one night. But betrayal, once invited, never leaves quietly. Morning light crept through curtains of gold and linen. Nerissa dreamed of ocean waves and laughter. Downstairs, Seraphine moved barefoot through the hall, her silk robe whispering across the floor. The house held two kinds of silence, one of peace, one of deceit. Lucian brewed coffee with shaking hands. The scent of it rose between guilt and denial. He watched Seraphine slip behind the guest room door as Nerissa stirred above them. Every sound felt too loud. The creak of wood, the clink of a spoon. He told himself it would end today. He would find her an apartment, pay the rent, and erase this night. But when Seraphine smiled at him, slow and knowing, the lie deepened. Upstairs, Nerissa hummed to the baby, unaware of the stranger below. The air itself seemed divided. Two worlds stacked under one roof. Love slept above. Betrayal breathed beneath. Lucian whispered into the empty kitchen, "Just one night." Yet even he no longer believed it. Days passed, but the house did not rest. Nerissa noticed the second wine glass left in the sink, the faint trace of unfamiliar perfume near the stairs. Once she heard footsteps at midnight and told herself it was the staff. Yet the feeling lingered, heavy and cold. Lucian grew restless, snapping at small questions. His lies were polite but unconvincing. Nerissa watched him pour coffee for two, then quickly pour one cup down the drain. "Busy morning?" she asked. He smiled too quickly. Her heart wanted to trust, her mind wanted to ask. Between them stretched a silence shaped like fear. She pressed a hand to her belly and whispered, "Maybe I'm imagining things." But love does not erase intuition, it only delays it. Somewhere in the house, the truth was waiting, patient as a shadow. And every night Nerissa prayed that her instincts were wrong, even as she knew they weren't. And when morning came, truth decided it would no longer wait. The morning smelled of coffee and quiet lies. Nerissa woke early, queasy from restless dreams. She moved slowly down the stairs, barefoot, one hand on the railing. The kitchen light was already on. At first, she thought Lucian was there. Then she saw her. Seraphine stood by the refrigerator, wrapped in a silk robe that shimmered like guilt itself. Their eyes met, shock colliding with arrogance. For a moment, time held its breath. Then a glass slipped from Nerissa's hand, shattering across the tiles. No words came, only the sound of her pulse. Seraphine stammered, I didn't mean to intrude." But her posture told another story. Nerissa felt her throat tighten, her stomach twist around the fragile life inside her. Upstairs, the clock ticked, unaware that everything had just ended. Her voice broke into a whisper, half to herself, half to the silence. "She's here. In my home." The air felt thin, impossible to breathe. Lucian entered the kitchen, still adjusting his tie, unaware of the storm waiting. Nerissa stood rigid, her face pale, the broken glass at her feet. "Who is she, Lucian?" Her voice trembled, more disbelief than anger. He froze, eyes darting between them. She's a client. It's not what you think." Seraphine lowered her gaze, performing innocence. "I just needed help," she murmured. "Help?" Nerissa repeated, the words slicing the air. "While I carry your child upstairs?" Her voice cracked, but she didn't look away. Lucian reached for her hand. She stepped back. He tried to smooth chaos with practiced calm, promising explanations, pretending control, but truth had already taken the room. Each excuse fell heavy, useless. Tears burned behind Nerissa's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "You brought her into our home," she said softly, "and still expect me to believe you?" Lucian had no answer, only silence loud enough to confess everything. Her body gave out before her will did. Nerissa staggered backward, one hand gripping the counter, the other clutching her belly. A sharp pain rippled through her abdomen. "Lucian," she whispered, the name half plea, half disbelief. He moved toward her, panic flooding his composure. "Sit down. Please, it's okay." But nothing was okay. The house spun around her, the air thick with perfume and betrayal. "You brought her here," she gasped, "into the house meant for our child." Seraphine stood frozen, face drained of color. Lucian tried to hold Nerissa, but she pushed him away, trembling. "Don't touch me," she said, her voice raw. Tears finally fell, heavy and silent. She sank to the floor, breathing hard, whispering to the life inside her, "You're safe, baby. I'll keep you safe." In that moment, love and pain became the same heartbeat. What broke in her eyes wasn't just trust, It was the illusion that love could survive without respect. By evening, word reached Judge Malcolm Hale. The retired judge arrived without warning, his presence cutting through the tension like a verdict. Nerissa sat on the couch, pale and silent, her hands folded protectively over her stomach. Lucian tried to explain, stumbling over fragments of apology. Malcolm listened, his expression unreadable. "You've done enough," he said quietly, the tone more final than loud. "My daughter doesn't need excuses. She needs protection." Lucian started to protest, but the old man's gaze stopped him cold. "You mistake wealth for power, Mr. Ward," Malcolm said. "But justice has a longer memory." He turned to Nerissa, his voice softening. "You will not face this alone. Do you understand me?" Nerissa nodded, eyes red but steady. "Yes, Dad." Malcolm placed a hand on her shoulder, his jaw tight. "Then let's begin." The man who once sentenced criminals now prepared to defend his own blood. The law had just entered the story. Days blurred into quiet determination. Nerissa, guided by her father, began to collect proof. She combed through bank records, hotel receipts, and emails hidden behind passwords Lucian thought she'd never find. Each document stripped away another layer of denial. There were transfers to Seraphine's business, luxury gifts written off as client expenses, credit card charges for weekends that never existed. Every number told the same story: money buying silence, love paying the price. Lucian avoided home, drowning himself in meetings that no longer mattered. Nerissa watched from afar, her heartbreak cooling into resolve. "He built his empire on trust," she whispered. "Now it will fall on truth." Malcolm reviewed every detail, methodical, precise. "When the time comes," he told her, "we'll let the evidence speak." In the dim light of her study, Nerissa gathered the final file into a neat stack. For the first time since that morning, she exhaled without shaking. Justice, like motherhood, required patience, and both had just begun. While she built her case in silence, across the city, Lucian began to feel the weight of what was coming. Lucian tried to drown the noise in work, but everything he touched began to slip. Clients delayed meetings, partners hesitated. Whispers spread through boardrooms that the great Lucian Ward was distracted. He smiled harder, spoke faster, and convinced no one. Ward Capital, once his fortress, now felt like a fragile house of glass. Reports piled on his desk unread. Even the coffee tasted wrong. The nights grew longer, and the city lights outside no longer looked like victory. They looked like judgment. Seraphine called daily, her voice sharp. "You promised me more than shadows," she said. "When do I become real?" Lucian avoided her, pretending business kept him busy, but guilt and fear began to twin inside him, feeding off each other. His phone buzzed nonstop, investors wanting answers he couldn't give. He stood before the mirror, tie loose, eyes hollow. For the first time, he didn't see power staring back. He saw a man slowly losing everything he thought he'd conquered. Wealth had once made him untouchable. Now, it was only making the fall louder. It started with a single message, short, cruel, and final. "You can't erase me, Lucian." Attached was a photo of them together at a hotel. His stomach dropped as the image glowed on his screen. He called her instantly. "Seraphine, what are you doing?" Her laugh was soft, dangerous. "Making sure you remember who I am." She wanted more: status, money, control. "You promised me a future. I'm done being a secret." Lucian felt panic rise. "You'll ruin everything," he said. "Please don't do this." But Seraphine wasn't bluffing. She had screenshots, voice messages, even receipts tied to his name. She threatened to send them to the press one by one. He offered money, begged for silence, but greed doesn't negotiate with fear. "I don't want your money," she said. "I want your name." He ended the call, drenched in sweat. For the first time, the empire he built began to feel smaller than one woman's anger. The walls of his success trembled. The scandal he feared most was already breathing down his neck. Nerissa no longer cried. Tears had turned to clarity. She watched the news, saw Lucian's face flash across screens, and felt something inside her settle. Love had once blinded her. Now, truth kept her awake. That night, she stood by the window, holding the divorce papers her father prepared. The city outside glowed like temptation's graveyard. "My daughter deserves a world without lies," she whispered, her voice steady but soft. Lucian had left voicemails, pleas, apologies, bargains, but each one sounded smaller. She had begged for honesty once. Now she wanted freedom. She signed her name carefully, as if writing the final line of a story too long in pain. "I once thought love meant forgiveness," she murmured. "Now I know it means protection." She sealed the papers and exhaled for the first time in months. The air felt clean again. Her child kicked softly, a reminder of why she couldn't turn back. Some endings aren't cruel, they're necessary. And Nerissa was finally ready to begin again. Malcolm Hale worked with precision only years in the courtroom could teach. Each document, each affidavit, was another brick in a wall of justice. Nerissa watched him in quiet awe. "He built his empire on deception," Malcolm said. "We'll bring him down with the truth." The petition was filed at dawn. Hale versus Ward. Grounds: adultery, emotional distress, misused marital assets. Before noon, the papers were served. The shock hit Lucian like cold iron. His name made headlines before he could speak. He tried to reach Nerissa, but she was unreachable. Her father answered instead. "You've had your chance to be decent," Malcolm said flatly. "Now we'll be lawful." Lucian stared at the documents, realizing his fortune could no longer buy silence. The fight he feared most had just become public record. Outside, the sky turned gray, heavy with rain. Nerissa stood at the window, watching the first drops fall. "It's not revenge," she whispered. "It's protection." The storm had begun, and this time she wasn't afraid to stand in the rain. The headline stretched across every paper. Billionaire, Lucian Ward, faces divorce scandal. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed like lightning. Inside, the air buzzed with tension. Nerissa entered quietly, one hand on her belly, her father beside her. She moved with calm purpose, her silence stronger than any speech. Lucian arrived moments later, surrounded by lawyers, eyes sunken and tired. The judge began. Evidence appeared on a screen. Messages, receipts, hotel bills. Each piece cut deeper. Lucian looked down, avoiding Nerissa's gaze. Every truth spoken aloud was another brick pulled from beneath him. Reporters scribbled. The audience murmured. The world that once praised him now watched his undoing. Nerissa sat still, her expression unreadable. Justice didn't need rage. It needed proof. When the session ended, Lucian finally looked up. For the first time, he met her eyes. There was no hatred, only distance. A final goodbye without words. He realized then, losing her love was punishment enough. The court could only make it official. When the judge asked for his statement, Lucian stood slowly. The courtroom lights felt hotter than fire. "I only wanted to help a friend," he said, voice shaking. "Seraphine was in trouble. I made a mistake, but my intentions weren't cruel." The judge looked up from her notes, eyes cold and steady. "A friend?" she repeated. "While your wife carried your child?" The words echoed like a sentence before the verdict. Lucian swallowed hard. His lawyers avoided his gaze. Behind him, reporters whispered. He tried again, softer this time. "I lost my way. I never meant to hurt anyone." But remorse sounded too late in a room built for truth. Nerissa sat still, her hands folded, her father beside her. She didn't flinch. The silence between them was heavier than judgment. Lucian lowered his eyes, realizing his voice could no longer buy sympathy. For a man who had once spoken to rooms of hundreds, this was the first time no one believed him. The clerk called the next witness, Seraphine Vale. She entered with cautious grace, dressed in gray, eyes lowered. The whispers in the room followed her like smoke. At first, she played the part of the victim, describing her friendship with Lucian, her struggles, her gratitude. But under cross-examination, the calm cracked. The judge pressed harder. "Did Mr. Ward ever offer you money to remain silent?" Seraphine hesitated too long. He gave me money to help," she said. "To help," the attorney repeated. "Or to keep you quiet." Her shoulders dropped. "To keep me quiet?" she whispered. The room gasped. Reporters scribbled. Lucian's lawyers froze. The confession landed like thunder. Malcolm Hale leaned back, his eyes cold with satisfaction. Nerissa's heart pounded, not with triumph but relief. The truth had finally spoken for her. Lucian bowed his head, every ounce of defense collapsing under the weight of his own actions. There was no escape left, only consequence. The judge reviewed the evidence in silence, the weight of it filling the room. When she finally spoke, every voice fell quiet. Given the proof of misconduct, emotional distress, and the welfare of the unborn child, she said, the court grants temporary and then full possession of the marital home to Mrs. Nerissa Hale. The words struck like the final toll of a bell. Lucian's jaw tightened. Nerissa's eyes glistened, not from triumph but from release. The judge continued, Mr. Ward is ordered to provide full financial support and refrain from contact outside legal counsel. Reporters leaned forward. The gallery whispered. Nerissa reached for her father's hand, her grip trembling but strong. Malcolm whispered, It's over now, sweetheart. Lucian looked toward her, searching for any trace of forgiveness. There was none, only quiet dignity. When the gavel fell, the echo carried longer than expected. For the first time, Nerissa felt safe inside the house that had once felt haunted. Justice had spoken, not loud but clear. Days after the verdict, Ward Capital released a statement. Mr. Lucian Ward will step down indefinitely. The news spread faster than any of his successes ever had. Investors withdrew. Clients vanished. His name became a warning whispered in hallways he once owned. The mansion he built stood empty, its gold edges now mocking. He spent nights in a rented apartment, watching his empire dissolve one headline at a time. Seraphine stopped answering his calls. His board demanded explanations he couldn't give. For every lie he had told, another door closed. He looked at his reflection in the dark window. No suits, no cameras, no applause. Only a man stripped of illusion. Lucian had believed power made him untouchable. Now, he understood that power without integrity was only a slow form of ruin. He had everything once. Now, even peace refused to visit. Scandals are short-lived, and Seraphine Vale learned that the hard way. The tabloids stopped calling. New headlines replaced her name within weeks. Investors who once courted her now crossed the street to avoid her. She tried to sell her story again, but no one cared. The drama had burned too bright, too fast. Even sympathy had a shelf life. She left New Orleans quietly, her designer dresses packed into cheap suitcases. Rumors said she moved west chasing another dream, or another man. No one bothered to confirm. Lucian never saw her again. For him, she became a ghost made of perfume and regret. Nerissa never spoke her name. In her home, silence replaced bitterness. She had learned that forgetting was a kind of victory, too. Seraphine faded into the city's noise, swallowed by the same hunger that had brought her there. The story moved on, but her echo lingered, a reminder that greed burns faster than love ever could. In the quiet that followed, life began to heal itself. The noise faded, and for the first time in months, the city felt still. Rain fell outside as Nerissa went into labor, thunder echoing softly in the distance. The pain was sharp, but her focus never wavered. Her father stood outside the room, silent and prayerful. Hours passed before the cry came, a cry pure and strong enough to break through every shadow. The nurse smiled. "It's a girl." Nerissa held the small bundle close, tears filling her eyes. The baby's warmth pressed against her heart, steadying every tremor of fear. "Clara," she whispered, the name trembling through a smile. "We made it, my love. We survived." She kissed the baby's forehead, inhaling the scent of new life. In that fragile moment, the world felt right again. The noise of courtrooms and betrayal faded into silence. All that remained was this: breath, heartbeat, and love unbroken. Outside, the rain stopped. Dawn crept through the window, painting gold across the hospital walls. Nerissa closed her eyes and whispered, "You're safe now, Clara. We both are." It wasn't victory that filled her heart, but peace, the rare kind born only after surviving ruin. Weeks later, Lucian stood at the hospital door holding a small bouquet. He hadn't seen Nerissa since the verdict. His reflection in the glass looked older, humbled, stripped of every mask he once wore. When he entered, Nerissa sat by the window, cradling Clara. The baby's tiny fingers curled around her mother's necklace. Lucian froze. For the first time, he saw not what he had lost, but what he had almost destroyed. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said quietly. "I just wanted to see her." Nerissa hesitated, then nodded. She passed Clara into his arms. Lucian's hands trembled as the baby blinked up at him. "Hey, little one," he whispered, voice breaking. "You don't know me yet, but I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you can." Tears rolled freely down his face. No speech could undo his sins, but holding Clara made him understand redemption wasn't about words. It was about change. And for once, he wanted to change for something pure. Lucian sat in the hospital chair, Clara asleep in his arms. Nerissa watched quietly, her expression unreadable. The air was heavy with memories, but also something gentler, acceptance. He looked up, his voice low. "I'm sorry for everything." She didn't answer. Instead, she reached over, adjusting the blanket around their daughter. The gesture was simple, but it said more than words ever could. She was no longer his wife, but she would always be the mother of his child. When Clara stirred, Nerissa took her back gently. "She needs rest," she said. Her tone held no anger, only calm resolve. Lucian stood, unsure whether to stay or go. Nerissa met his eyes, a quiet mercy in her gaze. "I forgive you," she finally whispered, almost too softly to hear. "But I won't forget." He nodded, understanding. Some forgiveness isn't spoken to heal the other person. It's spoken to free yourself. As he left, the door closed softly behind him, and Nerissa exhaled the last of her pain. Years passed quietly. The house that once held sorrow now echoed with Clara's laughter. Nerissa planted a small garden outside, filling it with tulips and wild roses. Each bloom was a promise to grow, even after storms. Clara grew curious and bright, asking about her father with a child's innocence. Nerissa always answered gently, "He loves you. He's learning how to show it." Lucian, now living modestly, volunteered at shelters and schools, teaching financial literacy to young people. His tailored suits were gone, replaced by rolled-up sleeves and humility. Sometimes he'd send Clara books or letters signed "Love, Dad." Every few weeks they met at the park. Clara ran to him, laughing, while Nerissa watched from a bench, smiling faintly. Time hadn't erased the past. It had softened its edges. In the rhythm of ordinary days, they each found a new kind of peace. Not perfect, not easy, but real. Because life, like forgiveness, was something they were still learning to build. There are houses built with money, but only love keeps a home alive. There are mistakes so deep they strip everything away, only to teach us how to begin again. Lucian Ward lost his wealth, his power, and his pride. Yet through loss, he learned the meaning of responsibility. Nerissa Hale lost her trust, but found her strength. And in that strength, she gave their daughter a better world. Clara became the bridge between their two worlds, proof that something good could grow from ruin. As years passed, the mansion by the river stood quietly, no longer gilded in arrogance but in memory. Its walls carried the sound of laughter again. The story had come full circle, not as tragedy, but as truth. And somewhere in that truth lived the lesson. Love without respect collapses, but love rebuilt through pain can endure. If you believe justice and love still exist in this world, share their story. Someone, somewhere, might need to hear it tonight.